Welcome to this meeting of the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission. I would ask the secretary to call the city secretary to call the roll, please.
Planning Commission Secretary.
Planning Commission, sorry. Yes.
Commissioner Dewey.
Present.
Commissioner Ellison is absent due to a medical issue. Commissioner Gay.
Here?
Commissioner Hunter is absent due to a speaking conflict down at Emory Law School. Commissioner Stewart.
Here.
Commissioner Stockdale.
Here.
Commissioner Strange.
Here.
Chair Bryan.
Here.
And Commissioner Davis here.
I hereby declare this meeting in order. The agenda item under new business today is discussion and possible consideration of a resolution of the mayor and commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach pursuant to 22 Del Code Section 708, referring to the Planning Commission a potential alteration of a public way on Baltimore Avenue at its easterly terminus for a report of impacts, both positive and negative, of the proposed alteration. Would ask counsel for the Planning Commission to give us an overview, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Luke Mehta. I'm the solicitor for the Planning Commission. 1 week ago, on September 29, the Rehoboth Beach Board of Commissioners passed a resolution referring to the Planning Commission a potential partial abandonment or alteration, depending on your perspective, of Baltimore Avenue at its easterly terminus to accommodate enhancements to the Rehoboth Beach Patrol Building, both for a report of impacts, both positive and negative, of the proposed abandonment or alteration. I thought it might be helpful to provide some textual and statutory context to the referral. Section 33 of the city charter. So Section 33 of the city charter provides in subsection A that the commissioners, that's the Board of Commissioners, not this body, but the Board of Commissioners, shall have the power, which makes sense, shall have the power and authority to locate, lay out, and open new streets and to widen or abandon streets or parts thereof whenever they, that is the Board of Commissioners, shall deem it to be in the best interest of the city. Section D of that same charter provision, Section 33, provides at the time and at the place fixed for the resolution, the commissioners, that's the Board of Commissioners, shall hear such residents or taxables of the city or owners of property affected thereby as shall attend the hearing. After the hearing of all objections, the commissioners, the Board of Commissioners, shall at said meeting or at a subsequent date, as it may deem proper, adopt a resolution to proceed with or abandon the proposed locating, laying out, widening, altering, vacating, or abandoning of any street or streets contemplated in its aforementioned prior resolution. So the above that language defines what the Board of Commissioners' duty will be when the Planning Commission issue its report back to the Board of Commissioners. But it does provide some context, of course, to the scope of what the Planning Commission may want to discuss today. In addition to the city charter provision, there's a section of the Delaware Code, a state code, which is really the enabling statute that enables any municipality in Delaware to establish a planning commission. So that would be Title VII. And one of those sections in 22 Del Code is Section 708, which is the basis for the referral here. So I will quote relevant sections of that section of 22 Del Code, Section 708, a reference of certain matters to planning commission. In a city or town having a planning commission, like we have here, established under this chapter, but which has not adopted an official map. As testimony, I believe we'll hear today that we do not have an official map in the city. No public way shall be laid out, altered, relocated, or discontinued unless the proposed laying out, alteration, relocation, or discontinuance has been referred to the planning commission of such city or town, and such commission has reported thereon or has allowed 45 days to elapse after such reference without submitting its report. And the end of that paragraph goes on to say, and this is language that's relevant not only for this particular referral, but any matter that's referred by the Board of Commissioners to the Planning Commission. Such Planning Commission shall have full power and authority to make such investigations, maps, and reports and recommendations in connection therewith relating to any of the subjects referred to under this section as it deems desirable. We'll see here in a second that the actual referral from the Board of Commissioners refers to that first section of Section 708 that I just referred to, but at that last section does authorize the Planning Commission to address in its report matters that are related to the actual referral. Otherwise, there really isn't much guidance, at least affirmative guidance, statutory guidance for the scope of the Planning Commission's review here today. The actual language of the referral from the Board of Commissioners from last week is as follows, at least the relevant language. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach in session met this 29th day of September 2023 that under 22 Del Code Section 708, which is what I just referred to, the proposed alteration of Baltimore Avenue at its easterly terminus is referred to the City of Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission for report concerning the impacts, both positive and negative, of the proposed alteration. The Board of Commissioners resolution also directs that orders that relevant materials, exhibits, and presentations be provided to the Planning Commission. Those materials have been posted on and are embedded in the agenda, which is publicly available, some of which will be shown here today. I mentioned that there is not much affirmative statutory guidance regarding the scope of what the Planning Commission should be doing here today, although it can be inferred from the other sections I referred to. There are some negative guidance or negative implications that can be drawn, however, from other sections. First, this is not a site plan review. This is not a site plan review. This is a matter that's been referred from the Board of Commissioners to the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission pursuant to a particular state statute, 22 Del Code Section 708. Second, as we'll see in a second, the city's zoning code does not apply to city-owned land. The city's zoning code does not apply to city-owned land. Third, what has been referred to the Planning Commission is the partial abandonment of Baltimore Avenue, not the Beach Patrol building itself. So as I mentioned, Section 270-3 scope, Section 270-3 scope of the city code, which is the zoning code, Chapter 270 is the zoning code, provides, quote, this chapter, the zoning code, shall not apply to lands owned by the City of Rehoboth Beach. Second, this is not a public hearing. The Board of Commissioners will hold a public hearing, presumably at some point, but this is simply a public meeting. This is not a public hearing, so people aren't going to be put under oath, although there may be presentations that are made. In view of the foregoing, it's your meeting, not my meeting. I'm just here to provide some guidance. My guidance and my advice would be to focus at least primarily on the issues that have been specifically referred to the Planning Commission by the Board of Commissioners. That is, potential impacts, both positive and negative, of the proposed partial abandonment of Baltimore Avenue. You may want to hear from people who have been working on this project for a while. That is the city representatives, the architect, property owners who may be affected, about the specific dimensions of the proposed abandonment, as well as whether they will be affected one way or the other, positive or negative. And with that, unless there are any questions regarding the basic statutory background and context of how we got here, there are some preliminary points that I would suggest you simply want to confirm before getting to the meat of things today. So I will tee up the issues, and I will suggest that you ask the appropriate questions. You may want to confirm here today for everybody that adequate notice has been given to the public generally about today's public meeting, as well as actual notice to affected property owners along Baltimore Avenue.
Yes. To set out some type of framework for today, I think what we'll try to do is elicit information that we think is relevant and helpful in making any type of recommendation here. We certainly want to hear from members of the public. We thank you for coming. And we have city officials here, so let's start there if we can. I guess, Mr. Janis, would you confirm for the record that that this land that they seek to partially abandon is city property?
That is correct, Chair.
Okay. And Mr. Mandalis, any quarrel with that?
No, none whatsoever.
All right. Is there an official city map, Mr. Janis? Not a zoning map, but a city map of parcels.
I can weigh in on that, Chair. No, we are not aware of an official city map. An official city map is something different than just some of the maps that we see around the city of zoning and other things. But an official city map is one that's discussed in Chapter 7 of Title 22, has to be recorded with the Recorder of Deeds. And I'm not aware of any official map that's been approved by the Board of Commissioners under Title 22, Chapter 7.
All right, sir. Thank you. Yes. If you would, Mr. Janis, if you have this information on behalf of the city, can you verify that notice has been given to the adjacent landowners on Baltimore?
Yes, notice has been given to actually the extent of Baltimore Avenue.
And that's done both, I assume, in the Cape Gazette?
It's been done both electronically and physically.
All right.
Both blocks or just the first block?
The entire
entire-
Baltimore Avenue.
entire Baltimore
Two
Avenue,
blocks, correct.
And when was that?
It happened throughout the week as we hit businesses that weren't open, during normal business hours and closed down for, limited scope during the off-season. It basically progressed throughout the week.
And has the city engaged in discussions with some of what I would call significant landowners on Baltimore about what's happening here?
Yes, we have.
Have you had any objections?
None that I was made aware of.
Yeah, point of clarification, when you said notice was given during the week, do you mean this past week or?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
Second point of clarification, was that notice given to both property owners and to the businesses that rent their space? Because I think most of the businesses are tenants of the particular buildings. Were the businesses, in addition to property owners, given notice?
We notified everyone that we possibly could, so property owners, property leases, electronically and paper-wise.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Ann Womack, would you please verify that the notice of this meeting was duly published?
The agenda was published in City Hall and on the city portal on September 29th. It was vetted on and reposted on October 4th and October 5th. That's all I have to.
Thank you. And is Representative of Davis, Bowen, Friedel present? Yes. Would you please come forward? I'm sure we'll have some questions. To begin with is to identify the specific properties immediately adjacent to the proposed abandonment. Can we just start there and then please educate us about what's going on?
Yeah, the properties to each side of the existing property is the Atlantic Sands Hotel and the Admiral, the Sirocco, and the Grottos, the end of that development there. I don't know if we want to bring up the
Yeah,
screen here.
that'd be great. He's got a presentation to make, I think.
All right. Trying to see where I can make this full screen. We'll just go through it like this. I don't know if you want me to walk through the history of the project?
Yes,
or-
please do.
Go ahead and do the presentation, I think, right? Yeah,
Okay.
please.
All right. So I'll try to be thorough but succinct here. So the outline of the presentation is as follows. We'll review the existing conditions, present design objectives that influence the project, present the proposed amenities in the new project, the design concept, and at the end, the impact on the existing east end of Baltimore Avenue. So as we may be aware here today, Baltimore Avenue runs for 2 blocks. It's 1 street north of Rehoboth Avenue here, the site we are discussing today as at the end of the eastern terminus of Baltimore Avenue. This is an existing survey of the site. The existing building currently occupying this site is the Baltimore Avenue Comfort Station. It's a one-story block building. Here's some photos of the existing structure. And at the top left corner here, you can see the existing conditions of the end of Baltimore Avenue, the existing curb line, and the fire hydrant there behind the existing building. So the design objectives that influence our design of the proposed building are as follows. We were looking to provide a state-of-the-art beach patrol headquarter facility, a facility with sweeping beach sight lines for the beach patrol, a facility designed for quick response and functionality, a facility for beach that had floor plan flexibility for after hours and non-seasonal uses, so it could be utilized by the public outside of the regular season as well. A facility that would be easily recognizable from the beach. It was also to be of scale and type contextual to Rehoboth Beach architecture. The comfort station was to be easily navigatable for boardwalk patron use. The building had to be elevated to meet current FEMA and Rehoboth Beach regulations. The building was to serve as a site gateway to Baltimore Avenue from the boardwalk and to the boardwalk from Baltimore Avenue. So the proposed amenities in this building, so these are amenities that are either absent in the existing building or have proven inefficient or lacking. So the proposed amenities of the new building include 2 dedicated family restrooms, 4 baby changing stations, an adult changing station, 4 changing rooms, bike racks for 34 bikes, ADA compliant access to the boardwalk, access to a lobby area for a beach patrol museum, access to a second floor deck overlooking the beach, and a second floor meeting area overlooking the beach that can be used in the off season. The beach patrol amenities that are currently lacking included in this facility are dedicated male and female locker rooms, dedicated male and female restrooms with showers, a beach patrol commander's office with unobstructed second floor view, a dedicated indoor meeting area, a backup generator for utilization and emergency, ATV garages to store the ATVs off-site, off of the boardwalk, building designed to be utilized year-round, and ADA compliant access throughout the building. And over here we have a list of the fixtures including in the building. At the bottom is a tally showing how many more fixtures there are in this building than the existing. So we've increased the number of toilets by 7, the number of urinals by 1, number of lavatories by 5, and the number of showers by 2 in this new building. So now we'll look into the design. So this is looking from the boardwalk, looking east, or it's the east elevation looking west. So here you can see the ATV garages on either side and the ADA ramps on either side of the building. One of the things that we had to do for ADA access to the boardwalk, and one of the reasons the site got so much longer, is we had to chase that ADA ramp up to the existing street level, which is approximately 5 feet 4 inches higher than the boardwalk level. So a 1 to 12 ramp, that's 54 feet of just ramp, not including the required landings.
Can I interrupt just a minute to ask a question about, this is looking west, correct? Looking
Yes.
So then the ocean should not be in the background?
No, that's it's not the ocean. That's just the grade plane of the rendering
Right,
program.
sure looks like, yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have some other renderings we're going to show today showing what the buildings look like on either side, but I just wanted to point that out so people didn't think, because to me it looks like the ocean. I understand it's just gray area, but that's
Yeah.
what it looks like.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
Uh-huh. So here we're looking at the northern elevation. Notice the Beach Patrol Commander's office in red on the second level, and the unobstructed 180-degree views out of the windows there, as well as the second level balcony overlooking the beach. And the you can see the ADA ramp on this side as well. Again, northern view. Also notice the backup generator on this side, and here you can see the doors to the family restrooms and the changing rooms on the side of the building. And here we're looking at the southern face. Again, you can see the ADA ramp on this side, and you can see the symbolism and signage, so the building is easily recognizable on the boardwalk. And then this is the proposed elevation you would see on Baltimore Avenue. This is the western elevation. So you can see the proposed curb line here in front of the building. And then this is an aerial shot overlaid on the existing site in Google Earth. So you can see the extent of the site here coming out to the entrance of the Sands Hotel and then curving back to allow access to the Admiral on this side. And this is the proposed site plan. Again, you can see access to the Sands, access to the Admiral out here. And then we've relocated the fire hydrant that was behind the existing building to the northern side of the street in front of the Sands Hotel.
You commented on the Admiral. Is the Sirocco is right there too, right? Isn't that the?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's actually the access to the Sirocco there. Yes, you're correct. Thank you. And to the point of what we're here for today, this is an overlay of the new site plan over the existing site plan. In this one, we have highlighted the existing curb line and the existing building in blue, so you can see where it sits as opposed to the new building. Here we've highlighted the new building in green, and then we've highlighted and overlaid both of them and added dimensions. It's kind of hard for me to read them here, but I'll give
Is
you a
what is
feel.
outlined in blue to be abandoned?
Yes, so that's the existing curb line now. So what we're proposing, the new curb line would be the green.
The green. Yeah,
Can you blow that up so everybody can see it better?
And there's also, the next slide has the hash.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
the next slide, we've hatched that area
We can blow that up.
so
That'd
you
be
can
great.
see.
Yeah, okay.
And then just to touch on a few of the dimensions, so the existing street width at the end of Baltimore Avenue is approximately 74 feet, 3 inches wide. And the proposed curb extends from the existing curb approximately 64 foot, 10 inches to the farthest point. So that's to the tip of the landscaped area. To the point that lines up with the Sirocco entrance, it's extending 46 feet, 10 inches. So it goes back 18 feet.
So what's the total square footage of the proposed abandonment?
So the total square footage of that hatched area there is, hold on, 3,843 square feet.
Sorry, can you say that again, please?
3,843 square feet.
Okay.
Yep.
Members of the commission, anybody have any questions at this point before he proceeds further?
Well, this is pretty much the end of the slide, so.
Just one question. You indicated earlier that by using the ADA compliant ramps, that further extended the amount of area that you needed
Yes.
for it to be abandoned. We can't talk about the building, but the question I would raise is, more area is being taken because they are ramps as opposed to lifts, which they exist. And so that was apparently ruled out.
Yes, yeah.
And ruled out for what reason, if I may ask?
For service and maintenance mainly. I mean, having lifts along there, you would have to maintain lifts at the beach level versus.
Okay, but, all right, but the area, I think, the area with the triangular section and in about another, looks to be about 8, 10 feet, would not have to be abandoned if in fact an alternative was implemented, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It is possible.
Well, the ramp ending ends at the end of, so if you see here, I don't know if you can see my mouse up there. Yeah. So the end of the ramp is in line with the stairs that step down to the front of the existing building. So, I mean, yeah, the triangular area, the landscape area that comes out could potentially be brought back. However, right now that's required to protect the ADA parking spaces there. If we didn't have that there, then we could not have our ADA parking there. So we would have to relocate the ADA parking down the street somewhere, and patrons would have to, go down the sidewalks, I suppose.
Okay, but just from a transportation perspective and considering ADA requirements, those two spaces could in fact exist on Baltimore Avenue, not necessarily in that position. There's nothing that I can think of off the top of my head that legally requires those two to be there as a function of ADA.
No, it was more of a desire because there are two existing currently. I don't know if you see them faded out here under this plan, but there's two existing currently right there.
Yeah, and the code does require two spaces to be located near the boardwalk on that block,
Right.
as well as two additional spaces located on the south side. In fact, are they further down? Are there still two ADA parking spaces further down on the south side
Yes.
of Baltimore Avenue? Okay, so
Right, it's,
Where are those other two? Because I was. Yes, the other two spaces. How far down Baltimore Avenue are they?
I don't have that on this plan. I'm not certain.
else know? Yeah, okay, they're down, okay, down there in front of the theater.
I don't know if we can. I'm not sure if that's them or if that's a loading space there. Is it? Okay.
That's not them.
But we have not done anything different with the rest of the street in this proposal, so.
I've one question. We've talked about the ADA places on the north side that are going to be relocated. On the south side of Baltimore Avenue, within the hatched area, there is also a loading zone and a fire zone. Where are they now?
So the fire zone, if you see this, we still have our turnaround here, and the loading zone is in the street with the existing loading area down here. The loading zone that was at the end of the street was for the grottos area, and we've worked with them, and they still have access, or still are going to have access until that building's taken down along the sidewalk area for bringing out the dumpsters. I mean, that's what they do currently with them. They bring them out on the sidewalk.
And the fire zone, I'm not talking turning radius. I'm talking where a fire truck or an ambulance or other emergency vehicle would come, since you're so much farther away from the boardwalk in the front of the Grotto property and the Atlantic Sands Hotel. What will the access for emergency vehicles be for emergencies that fire, injured people, whatever, and toward the front of the hotel on either the east side of the hotel, but also the north and south sides, since you're that much farther backed up?
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. The access would be further back down the street. I mean, it would still be in front of the new facility. We've met with the fire marshal and the local, the city, of course, and they didn't seem to have any issues with this proposed plan.
Well, but the letter that you got from the fire marshal's office simply says that the building itself, the plans for the new facility, meets the requirements. But I'm talking about the hotels on either side, on the east side. The fire trucks and ambulances are going to be substantially back west of where they can now access those hotels.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's been, again, like I said, it's been reviewed by the fire marshal. We've met out there. We discussed the streetscape when we were pursuing that with them, and there was no issues they saw with access.
But their permit only concerns the lifeguard station and comfort station. It does not extend to an analysis on the effect of access to the adjacent hotels.
Yeah, I mean, the analysis of the civil plans, they have to approve that they have to agree that they still have access to the adjacent properties. I mean, that's part of the fire marshal review of the civil drawings, the site plans. So they still have access. So there's the fire hookup to the Sands Hotel on the north side where the cursor is now, and there's the fire hookup to Sirocco on the south side here.
And those would still be accessible.
And the fire marshal has agreed that those are still accessible.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Because that dovetails with what I was going to bring up with the fire lanes. It may be that it's all meets the needs of the fire department. However, it's going to require a slight code change. Because in our code, chapter 92, it says, there are hereby established the following fire lanes within the corporate limits of the city. 3 of them are on the first block of Baltimore Avenue, and as an example, one says, on the north side of Baltimore Avenue from a distance of 10 feet westerly, measured from the face of the curb at the east end of the street. So since the east end of the street is changing, then that will need to be noted in a minor code change that I think I would recommend that the commissioners do the same time that they are officially doing the street abandonment. But beyond that, in this list, and there's like 30 or 40 of these fire lanes all over the city in the list, 3 of them are on this block of Baltimore. I guess one question I would have is, will that block still accommodate 3 fire lanes just located differently than where they are located now? Are there still going to be 3 on the block?
So, yeah, I guess it depends on how they're defining that. Obviously, they're defining that from the end of the existing curb.
Correct.
I would say the reasoning for that is because that's where the fire hydrant is. As I noted earlier, the fire hydrant's being relocated to the north side, next to the entrance to the Sands, and that area is striped out for access to that fire hydrant. So I would.
That's one. Where are the other 2?
I'm
Does
not certain. I mean,
anybody
I'm
else
not.
know? Kevin, do you know?
Thank you, Commissioner. So the fire lanes are designated by something other than just painting a spot on the ground for access. They're there for access to those external hookups or to the hydrant. So there'll certainly still be one there at the Sands because they have to have access to that one. There'll still be one over the Admiral. They're going to have that one. There'll be a fire lane at the fire hydrant. But it's not that I don't believe they're set up to say, well, there's going to be 3 on Baltimore Avenue. We always have to keep 3. They're set up to accommodate access to the other facilities that are there, if that makes sense.
I mean,
So anytime there's an external hookup, you have to have a fire lane. There will still be a fire lane for every external hookup. Everywhere you have a fire hydrant, you have to have a fire lane for access to that hydrant. There will still be an access.
so there are
fire
still 3 hydrants. There are still 3 lanes.
I don't know that there are 3 there now. They may very well be. I just don't know that.
Okay.
But for everyone that's going to be required, there will be one there. And I know we like to categorize every parking space in Rehoboth as a certain type of parking space. We have X number of these and X number of those, and this is that one. And we know we do that,
Yeah.
and we know there'll be some adjustment to the code
Right,
based
that's
upon where
that's all
these
I'm saying,
end up.
is there needs to be an
Right,
adjustment to the
and
code.
you'll recall, in the original concept for this, in the original contract, we had a large
Oh, yeah.
streetscape
Yeah,
feature
right.
in there.
Yes, yes.
Timing of it all just didn't work out. So there were some accommodations made in there for loading, short-term, those kind of things. Those aren't in there now. So we've got to just go back and we'll adjust, the parking spaces along the street to make sure, and we have to, if we have to change the code, we will,
Yeah.
to
Okay, I'm just
identify
wondering.
specifically where those are.
Okay, great.
Is it possible to get from the fire marshal's office some assurance that they will still, that even though we're moving back access to the boardwalk, however many feet, that there will still be adequate access for fire and emergency vehicles to get to service and protect the hotels on either side?
Sure, yes, ma'am. And really, it's much better here because if you look at the southern side right now, to go from like in front of the Admiral down to the boardwalk, I mean, it's like ice skating going down there in the wintertime, right? Because it's so steep and it gets wet and it's slick. So this will be a nice ADA compliant ramp
Oh,
Still same width.
I have no doubt that from a design perspective, this is a
No,
substantial improvement. I'm
correct,
just
and
concerned about
much better access for if you're jumping out of an EMT vehicle and you're trying to get a stretcher down to the front of the boardwalk, front of the Grotto Pizza. It's going to be much easier now it will be much easier under the new configuration than it is now.
And how about a fire in the front, on the east side of either hotel on the 4th floor?
Correct. So he's, what, 30 feet maybe longer from the fire hydrant?
Okay.
That's a couple of seconds for that fire crew. Yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Bridge, you want to finish your presentation, sir?
I mean, that was pretty much the end of it there.
Just to answer your question earlier about, so this is the exact depiction of the area?
Yes.
Okay, because
Yep.
there was some question about that at the 2 previous commissioner meetings, between the meeting on the 22nd and the meeting on the 29th, but this is final.
Yes.
Okay.
And maybe, unless anybody else has any questions, if you could just leave that particular and blow it up a little bit as a reference point as we entertain other discussions about the particular adjacent properties. I think that's probably as good a reference map as any for purposes of this discussion anyway. So whenever you're done, if you could just keep that up there, that would be great.
Yep.
Do you know of any negative impacts as a result of this abandonment to adjacent property owners?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I know the city's met several times with the Sands and Admiral and the developers with the Grotto's Pizza development. So
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be unfair and ask you a mathematical question, but I think you indicated that the square footage of that area that is hashed in pink or blue, whatever color that is, do you know what percentage 3,844 square feet is of the, I guess, the first block of Baltimore Avenue?
I have that, Luke.
Oh, you have
Because
that?
I talked to Nick before the meeting, and we looked at it on his computer, and the total square footage of the block is 58,818 square feet. So the space is, I don't know, 6-8%, 6-7%, something like that, of the street.
thank you, because I did not have that.
Yeah, fortunately, he had the calculation handy, so.
Can I-
You,
Yes, sir.
you indicated that you had discussions with the immediately adjoining and affected property owners. Maybe not you personally, but others. Were there any objections from those property owners or issues raised regarding compensation?
There were no objections that I was made aware of.
Yeah, the city manager, the assistant city manager and I have met multiple times with the 3 main ones, the Sands, what I call the Grotto's property, and then the Admiral. We didn't hear any discussion about compensation for loss. The things we heard were concerned about parking and make sure we can still unload and register guests and get them, in and out. So we had some ideas for short-term parking spaces and that kind of thing. Sands was, and both the other hotel, everyone was eager and concerned about access to their driveways or to their parking garages. So we made accommodations for all that. The Grotto property, there were some issues about where their lobby was going to be. So I think we adjusted some. I think they adjusted some, and we came to an agreement that worked for both of us. I was physically involved in all of those discussions with the hotel folks.
You mentioned the short-term parking for checking in, checking out. So those would be street parking spaces that would be earmarked for that? Is that what you're saying?
Going back to when we had the streetscape
Right.
portion of it with the
Yeah.
island in the middle,
Right.
and they were concerned that they were losing a couple of spots. Could we dedicate a couple for 30-minute or whatever, so people could temporarily jump in, go register, and then pull into their garage?
So is that information in writing? If it's not, then I think it should be, that the city should have an agreement with the property owners, or at least some written record of those accommodations that have been made, or those discussions that took place with the property owners.
I don't know that there's a written record of it now, but I'll certainly let them speak to any concerns they might have. Yeah.
And just a follow-up on that, there, just topically, and other people can talk about the specifics, you'd mentioned access. Was there also discussion with those impacted property owners in terms of the frontage along their property line?
Certainly, especially on the south side where, the new sidewalk and ramp was going to be. On the north side, it's not nearly as impactful, but yes, we had those discussions.
Mr. Strange?
Yes, actually, for both of you, I have a question. You indicated where the placement of the new fire hydrants would be, that technically the ease of access is actually improved with the new locations. The only question I had then, because I can't tell from the drawing and I forget, in the triangular outcropping, is that strictly landscaping and amenity in there?
Yeah. Currently, that's paver access and landscape on either side, and the purpose of that really is to, you're required the island to protect the ADA parking where there's going to be cars turning around here.
I was thinking more from an emergency standpoint, is it serves that purpose, but it also actually decreases the mobility for larger equipment if it has to go in there and there is an emergency. So from a turnaround standpoint, it could be problematic. And the ADA spots in and of themselves, you have conflicting objectives that are trying to be met, and it's rather difficult, and I understand that. But I think the outcropping is the only thing that I see that is somewhat bothersome in terms of the totality of emergency services and the importance to the city. That's it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir. Robertson, I know it's unusual to call on people, but you're here and we're here and we want to know.
Yeah.
Please tell us how this impacts, good or bad, the One Rehoboth project.
So Vince Robertson with Parkowski, Gerke, and Swayze for One Rehoboth. I don't have a formal presentation or anything. Hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later in front of you all, but for the hotel. But we have had multiple good meetings with the city. I know I haven't had a chance to tell that to you all, but either myself or some of our representatives, we have been at the mayor and commissioners meeting, because I think this has been a good working relationship on that level. And I'm probably going to leave some people out, but we've had meetings, multiple ones, in the caucus room with our team, which includes our engineers and architects and owners, the contractor, myself, with the city's public works folks, Dave Spohn and Friedel, both city managers, the city mayor, Mr. Mandelis. I think Wallace Montgomery was there at least one of those, as I recall. So everybody that has been involved with at least our side of the street has been present for those meetings, and they've been very good. It takes a while to design a hotel, so that was in process while sort of this was developing. And so we had meetings to make sure that the two projects synced. And one of those meetings actually resulted in a change to, not a material change, but a little bit of a geometry change to the entrance to the backside of the new hotel. The other thing that we needed to talk about was there is an existing Grottoes that's there right now. And Jeff Gosnier, who runs Grottoes, he wanted to make sure that the construction of all of this and the change to the end of Baltimore Avenue did not impact his current operations, because everything is loaded in back through the Sirocco, whether that's his propane deliveries, food, everything comes in back there. And again, looking at the designs and all the people that are the designers came together and realized it won't be any issue. We've been really pleased with how this has gone. And one of the other things, candidly, that we talked about throughout this whole process was not only, are we good with the design and how it impacts current and future uses of our property, but we wanted to try to save, frankly, the city money and, I'll be honest, our client money by, there's going to be utility work and excavation occurring at this end of Baltimore Avenue for both of these projects, hopefully, when ours comes through. We wanted to make sure all the utilities were sized appropriately and designed appropriately and located appropriately. And also, to the extent we can, do construction staging appropriately so that, we talk about this end of Baltimore Avenue, but you have to have the equipment that's going to be able to build this end of Baltimore Avenue. And there was a real focus on, okay, from both sides, how can we do that with the least amount of minimization to the street, visitors, residents, everybody in Rehoboth. And I have to say that that's been a really positive and good experience on all sides to get that. So that was a super long way saying that we don't have any objection to it. It's been a really good process and a really good exchange of information. One thing we did do, and you all hadn't seen this, and I know it was embedded in the agenda, I should share it with Mr. Mehta. I don't have control of the agenda.
We're gonna show.
Oh,
this.
okay.
Photos A and B at the
Yeah.
bottom of the agenda. They're actually tabbed right there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Photo A?
Yeah.
So,
And then photo B, just.
okay. I know ours is separate, not on the agenda, but one of the things we wanted to do was see how this project would look in real life at the end of Baltimore Avenue. And architects that are out of Chicago, I don't know, they know how to do this. It's like voodoo graphics to me to make this work, where you have something that doesn't exist superimposed on something that did, and it all matches right. But at any rate, this, I will say up front, this does not show the abandonment of Baltimore Avenue. I want to make that clear. But this shows how that lifeguard station will look in real life in the colors that it has with the two ATV portals, and you can see those ramps going up. That's obviously from the boardwalk side, and this is, and you can see down Baltimore Avenue. This is looking eastward with the ocean behind it, and you can see what it looks like at the end. So again, I may not be here nor there because it doesn't really deal with the actual area of Baltimore Avenue to be vacated, but it sort of shows you what that's going to look like. I'll put it back to that one.
It's a nice depiction for showing scale, so I appreciate having it because the others don't show it. The other
Well,
buildings.
and that's kind of what we thought about, and I know that some of the, and candidly, I appreciate that the cities didn't foot the bill to do all this, because on the city's rendering, they're sort of more abstract.
Right, yeah.
Obviously, my folks are doing this as part of a presentation, but again, it takes it out of abstract and gives you a more realistic view to scale what all that's going to look like. So,
But Vince, I have a couple questions based on, I realize we have not seen any plans since the concept plans last November. I can't believe it's been almost a year since we saw that. So anything that you have submitted to the city since then, we have not seen. This body has not seen
okay.
at all.
I know it's
No
been
idea.
submitted to the city, it just hasn't, I guess, worked its way to you.
Right, and so we haven't seen anything yet. So I am curious about, did you move, because there were two elements that looked to me like that they interfere a little with this project. One was the jump lobby, that no longer could anyone drive up to the jump lobby to let people off, which I thought was the purpose of it. So did you move the jump lobby, or is that now going to be access pedestrian only, or what?
I will tell you, I'm not prepared to answer that. My understanding is that it's been moved so that it's functional and it works, but whether it's pedestrian only or not, I wasn't prepared to go into that level of detail today. I just know with the architects that it's, because that, if you look, actually, it's kind of hard to see, but the entrance, if you can see my
Yeah, it's hidden by
cursor-
those trees in the
Yeah,
schematic.
it's
That's
back
why I'm
there.
asking. Yeah.
And I don't know where those trees are in relation to the actual entrance. And then the Admiral's back here, but, and that lobby was sort of in here. I know they looked at the grading of that ADA ramp to make sure that it all lined up, so I don't know that that's changed. And what ended up happening was, as I said, the geometry coming into here changed a little bit, and I think it got pushed back a little bit, and our internal loading area that we need to have is inside. So.
That was going to be one of my questions. But I have to tell you, too, the entrance to your parking ramps looks to now be obscured by a couple of feet. I mean, so did that get moved? I mean, on the drawings, it shows the 24 feet for the parking ramp, but now the red line of the curb goes into that a couple feet.
The plans that you saw in November have been changed.
Okay.
Because we've had all those meetings in that
Yeah,
time
okay.
period between then and now.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So that has
yeah,
been altered.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
So just to be,
Which is a good point, because what you would have seen then wouldn't necessarily have lined up
Correct.
with
That,
what's
yeah, that's why I'm
shown
asking.
here.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
so just to be clear on that, so both there have been discussions between the city and your client, both with regard to the existing Grotto's building, and you've had discussions regarding the impact of your proposed One Rehoboth.
Yes, that's correct.
And you're
All at the
satis-
same
and-
time, but yeah, no, we're
And
satisfied.
even though one is real and one is proposed at this point, you're satisfied with the discussions and whether you can work with them?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Strange?
Yeah, I have actually not for you, Vince, but for Kevin. Those two ADA parking spaces, are they 30-minute time-limited spaces, or are they
No, sir, not at this point. They're not planned to
not
be.
time-limited? Okay. The reason I ask that question is, if they're not time-limited, knowing how parking works in the city during season, regardless of what it is, if someone's coming into that area, they're going to be there for multiple hours. And so what I'm leading up to is, in terms of the abandonment, nothing to do with the building, that triangular section and those two spaces during most business hours, those two spaces are going to be completely consumed all the time. And so the turnaround capability in that area for emergency services is going to become even more limited. Strictly from the standpoint of the abandonment as to how much should or could be abandoned. And I see that as a concern. The triangular outcropping in those two spaces, effectively, you're eliminating that completely. I say you. The plans show that's would be completely eliminated. If that triangular outcropping isn't there and the two ADA spaces aren't there, that means you have another 20 feet, linear feet going down Baltimore Avenue that would be available. 20 feet by whatever the width of the street is. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Vince.
Anyone else for Mr. Robertson?
Thanks. That's
Thank you, sir.
helpful.
Thank you. I hope they all go this short for me.
No.
That's a different day. Is anyone here from the Admiral or the Atlantic Sands Hotel? Do you mind speaking to us, sir? Sure. Please come forward. Yes, sir, that's fine. Wherever you're comfortable.
My name is Chad Moore, the owner of the Admiral. First off, I'd like to thank you guys all for the communication this week. It was fantastic. We got emails, someone stopped by, and we also got I believe, a letter in the mail. So there were some questions earlier about was everything covered, and everything was covered very well. The project looks wonderful, very happy with it. One of our concerns has grown, what Ms. Hunter mentioned, is along the lines of life safety. We are very concerned about the abandonment coming down that road on emergency vehicles being able to service our property, but also the property in front of us, because with the commercial zoning, we're going to be, a centimeter apart. So we're concerned that the fire marshal has not reviewed what it will look like when the construction is done, and we would like to have the fire marshal approval with the city. Our insurance company, which I happened to meet with last week, we talked with them about this, and our carrier is looking into that. They had off the cuff suggested that we get a letter from the fire marshal and a letter from the city stating exactly what you had said, that the code is fine and there's no problem, and abandoning the 65 feet plus the additional 20 feet, my quick math tells me that's about 85 feet, that abandoning that does not impact the life safety of the properties that are there currently. And then the other concern we have, again, with that extra footage there, is the loading zone at the end of that street. With the restaurants on the boardwalk, with the properties at the end of the street, there's hardly a time you can go down there in the morning with an 18-wheeler in the middle of the street. And currently, if there's an 18-wheeler in the middle of the street, emergency vehicles could get around it. With this new plan, that will prove to be a challenge. And our trash location is at the easternmost edge of our property. We have the roll-off dumpsters, so a truck comes in, it's up to the sidewalk, and we have 4 roll-off dumpsters that they bring out, flip up, and then they go in. It's probably a 10 or 15 minute process to do that. In the summer, they're there, I believe, twice a week. And that again, with the abandonment and the street coming down 85 feet, that's going to cause a fair amount of congestion on the end of the street for us. And also, we have met with the city twice. We also have a meeting coming up this Wednesday to address these concerns with some of the city officials as well. Thank you.
Yes, sir. One moment, please.
If I could, just to clarify, there's not an 80-some foot extension. It's 40-something for the curb line and out to 68? 64 out to the point of that, point of the landscape feature, not 80-something.
Oh, because I thought at the earlier meeting, they said it was 65 out to the edge plus the parking space.
Well, yeah, so this is why I wanted that, Peyton, if you could just put that back. So it's really important, I think, for today and later for everybody to be on the exact same page regarding
Commissioners meeting, they said it was
exact
65 plus
exact
20.
dimensions. Then, and if you can, inform the Planning Commission where your property is located in respect. Not that one, Peyton. The other one. Is that the one that's
saying this one's the one with the dimensions on it? Sorry.
where your property is in respect of that cross-hatched?
We start, let's see here. We start, I believe, right here and go this direction. And we have a ramp that goes under, a ramp that goes up, and then 20-foot space here at the end.
So does, and, yes, and I know you're going to be talking this week. Does that drawing change what you just said to the Planning Commission in terms of your concerns?
Can somebody read, what are the dimensions? Yeah.
Can you do it in the mic so it's picked up?
Yeah, so that's why I was pulling up the other one a second ago. It's the one with the dimensions on it. So the dimensions from the existing curb to the furthest point is 64 feet, 10 inches.
Okay.
So I don't have this dimension here, but I wrote it down. The dimension to the proposed curb line back here, which is also lines in front of the parking spaces, is, I believe it's 46 feet, 10 inches. So it's 18 feet back.
About the same, yeah.
Well, we've had.
Public Works, right, but I'm just wondering, given what we've just heard about the concerns of that adjacent property owner, what, is there any input from the city on that? I mean, I don't know whether those concerns and the meetings he's going to have would necessitate any alteration of the plan at all. I don't know. Sounds like it's an open issue.
Well, if you want to restate what the concerns are, I mean, the access in front of his building doesn't change, right? The street is the same width in front of your street. The bump out is down from your street. Sure, so your fire connection is at the west end of your building. That doesn't change. The access to your driveways and your lobby doesn't change by anything we're doing there. The trash guys that come down and front end load, they do that now. It won't be any different for you, you know.
Right, but by shortening the street, it limits the access to the building in front of us.
Well, I would defer to Vince.
Do you mind coming back to the mic, sir?
Yeah, we can't, the tape doesn't pick you up otherwise.
Yes. Give us a summary from your perspective of just what exchanged here.
So our main concern is life safety and the fire and emergency access to the buildings that are on the east of us, and then our building itself.
And your insurance company has suggested getting a letter from the fire marshal that says that
And the city.
and the city.
Yeah,
That basically says this is all in compliance with city code and,
And nothing changes from yesterday till tomorrow. So it's the same, same acts, or the same ability for life safety.
all right. Anyone else? All right, thank you, sir. I'd like to open the floor to anyone from the public, whether you're a property owner or just interested. We'd like to hear from you, please. Mr. Cooper?
Thank you. I put together a statement last night, but it's probably not so great sounding today. But I have concerns with abandoning the street in the sense that, and I'll start, according to the county tax map, the lot to the south, Mr. Robertson did a very good job of representing his client, but according to the tax map, the lot is 100 feet by 113 feet, 100 feet along the boardwalk, and 113 feet along Baltimore Avenue, on the Baltimore Avenue side. This parcel has a frontage of approximately 69 feet along the south side of Baltimore Avenue. Measuring from the painted line recently placed in the street by the city, this frontage will be reduced to just 22 feet under the proposed abandonment. If approved, this action will turn a conforming lot into a non-conforming one, decreasing it to less than half the required 50 feet of frontage on the street. The owner of this lot is proposed in conjunction with two adjacent parcels they own to demolish existing structures and build a new building to contain retail space and a hotel. The Planning Commission is aware of this since the owner appeared before you last November for a project concept review. This is my statement, so I'll read it. Why the owner of these three parcels seem complacent about reducing their street frontage along Baltimore Avenue is beyond me. However, this does not mean that this action is proper and in the best interest of the city as a whole. During the demolition of the existing buildings, excavation of the basement, it would be safe to say there will be more than 1,000 truckloads of debris and dirt to be hauled from the site. All of this through 22 feet of street frontage. Even with their current 69 feet of street frontage, I suggest this would be a challenge. The only other possibility is for them to use the 25 feet of street frontage they have on Rehoboth Avenue, either instead of or in conjunction with the 22 feet on Baltimore Avenue. How many here feel accessing this construction site from Rehoboth Avenue is a good idea? We now have to deal with the construction of the new building. How many hundreds, probably thousands of trucks will need to access the site, loaded with concrete, steel, other building materials, equipment, furniture, and fixtures? Where will all the concrete pumping trucks park when they are working? What about the numerous pieces of heavy equipment that will need access? But wait, well, no, I'll skip that part. Additionally, I do not believe the hotel's owner has final approvals from regulatory agencies. They must still come before the Planning Commission for final site plan approval. What if this body or another reviewing agency finds 22 feet of street frontage is inadequate for the size or use of the building? What if they, for some reason, abandon their current plan? Will this abandonment of a portion of Baltimore Avenue adversely affect other potential uses? Again, I urge you to recommend rejecting the proposal to abandon a portion of the eastern end of Baltimore Avenue. It simply would not be in the right beat. It simply would not be right for the city to turn a conforming lot into a non-conforming lot. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Janis, city have a response to that conforming versus non-conforming lot with a 22-foot street frontage or?
Thank you, Chair. It depends on whether the boardwalk is considered a street or not. In prior applications, the boardwalk has been noted as a street.
All right. Yes, sir, Mr. Cooper.
I think if you look at the code, there's a section that says that there have to be 50 feet of frontage on a street, but it exempts the area from Hickman Street to the south end of the boardwalk for those properties front from the boardwalk. Now, it does not directly say that this is not street frontage, but I think it certainly is implicit in that.
All right. Thank you, sir. While, Mr. Janis, while I have your attention, how would this parcel be zoned?
It's a great question. There is currently no zoning to it
Because it's in a street.
because it's a street. That's
But when
correct.
it's not in the street anymore, what does it, how is it characterized?
I would say that it more closely would resemble a commercial zoning, a C1.
A C1.
As the surrounding properties are noted as C1.
Oh, okay, so you would, so, because my feeling is it needs to be labeled something on our zoning map, right? Would you agree with that?
It should be.
would be, and so it seems
No, it
like,
should not be.
one of the options would be to make it O1, since it's city-owned, to make it O1, like other open space in the city. There are other examples of open space that have buildings on them, and it would be contiguous with the open space that's on the other side of the boardwalk. I guess the other option would be to just call it a municipal building, the way City Hall is. And on the, I don't know if our planning consultants have any input on that, but I think part of our recommendation, if we move forward with it, is to suggest a zone for it. So,
Yeah, Mr. Walls, how's this building characterized? How's it zoned?
This building is not currently zoned. There is a hole, essentially, in the zoning map where we are sitting. But it's surrounded by
So
C1.
it's just a blank?
yeah, it's just blank.
Correct.
Yeah. But it is surrounded by C1, he's right about that.
Right. Well, I'm glad they
But I
spent
don't
all
think
this
you-
money. All right. Anyone else, please?
Oh, wait, did you want to say something?
I'd be
Oh,
happy
I'm
to
sorry.
weigh in. Thanks for the opportunity. So, as Mr. Meadows said earlier, the municipal properties generally are not zoned. That's because if a property is owned by the municipality is used for a municipal purpose, as this will be, we generally in the city have chosen not to zone those properties. If the city's property was used for a commercial shopping mall or something, and we leased the land to a commercial developer, in that instance, we'd want to zone the property consistent with whatever the developer was doing. But in the case of a municipal use on a municipal property, we generally do not zone those properties.
So you would label it municipal rather than an O1?
Yes.
Okay,
Just so it has some designation as the.
right, yeah.
So that means it would show up on the official zoning map as just a white space
Right.
comparable to this building and how it's treated.
Correct.
All right. Anyone else? And yes, please come forward.
Jan Conacy, 42 Oak Avenue. You know, everybody here seems very happy. You know, Vince is saying, you know, this is going to be great. We had great meetings. We all love everything. But I haven't seen anything in writing.
Can you please
You know,
speak into the mic so
I'm
that,
how do I do that? I thought I was.
Matt,
Okay.
can you help her, please?
All right, I got it. I got it. I have to agree with Mr. Moore's insurance company. As a taxpayer, I would like to see something in writing from every property owner who's impacted that says that they are happy with everything and very specifically happy. Because I know for the meeting that the mayor and commissioners had, they didn't see these same plans. Because I looked at the agenda from their meeting and it wasn't the same as this one. So I would like to see something in writing from all of these people because, you know, we have lawyers sitting up here and lawyers sitting out here, and we all know that lawyers end up in court eventually. If something happens and they haven't signed off, I just think as a taxpayer to protect the citizens, because, I mean, why are we here today? We shouldn't even be here. This should have already happened, you know, a long time ago. So in writing, that's what we need.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Walter Brittingham, 123 Hamilton Avenue. I've been working on this a long time, and I believed it would not be done right, and it's been proven. I've never thought about building a house without a complete set of plans, and the city has gone to the extent of the board, the commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach actually approved these plans or this construction to proceed without all the permits being in. I can prove that. The city knows that. It's never been exposed to the public, but that's not what this hearing is about. But I believe that you have authority beyond the zoning, et cetera, for the well-being of the people of Rehoboth, the business people, the residents, and the people that come to visit. I think this is a disaster that's about to happen. I cannot imagine what it's going to be like to see 30-yard construction dumpsters, containers, hundreds of them. There is going to have to be a crane or something like that out at the lift station on State Road to pull out the sheet piling and all the piling out there. And I think Baltimore Avenue, the people that reside on that street and own business on that street are going to go through hell and a half. I was around many years ago when the times were different, and at the Atlantic Sands, they, with permission, they put a fence down the center of the street. They were different times, and they went right on construction all through the summer. I'm not worried about when this gets done. It'll get built. The public is not going to have any say in it because it's being run by the Public Works Director, the city manager or the interim city manager, but there are no public committees that have a way to demand a voice. So again, some people saying in writing, what is the cutoff? What happens when the plumber, he wants a construction trailer and everybody else are going to line up down the street? You're going to need restroom facilities, trailers. I think half the street is going to be closed off to the construction. And I don't trust the city because they've demonstrated that in the recent past to be able to handle some of these construction projects because we only have one person, Mr. Evan Miller, that of the people that are running the city right now that lives in the city. The other people don't even live here. They don't have any passion to it. It's all about money, and I think you have a right to set some conditions and say, if it's going to get done, it ought to be minimum inconvenience, and the public ought to have a right to say. Thank you. Oh, by the way, we don't, lines in the sand says that the city is looking for input for the qualifications of a new city manager. Well, 16 months ago, we went through that beforehand. I don't know what changes, and nowhere do the city ever ask the taxpayers, residents, for their input for the new city manager and the people that run the city, or have any comment as to what they're paid. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I'm just going to repeat one thing that I mentioned early on. This is not a public hearing. This is simply a public meeting of the Planning Commission to on the referral. As I read the city charter, if this matter gets reported back to the Board of Commissioners, they will have a public hearing, at which time members of the public will be able to make a record of their either concerns against or their views in favor of that. I just wanted that to be clear.
You know, I think one of the most important details, and this is really the source of my frustration, and is at first I think the building looks great. I think the design objectives are extremely well stated, and that the street abandonment, supports those design objectives. Those I think are the positives. What I'm struggling with is that we're here not in the 11th hour. I feel like we're here in the 12th hour to try to move this forward. And it's not that we're coming to it late, it's that the most important detail has been completely left out of presentations and discussions until 2 weeks ago today, when the commissioners had a special meeting for purposes of voting on this. In fact, the first presentation of this new plan, obviously there's been talk of a beach patrol building for years, and has been in the works for probably the last 4 or 5 years. But this particular plan was first presented on August 8th, 2022, where I was sitting up here as a commissioner. Not one of us noted from the drawings about that the building was going into the street, because no one presenting told us. So unless there was there wasn't some measurement on the plan that we could see as laymen, as non-engineers, we did not see, and no one mentioned it. The same plans were presented again in May of 2023. Again, not one word. And so it came up only within the last month that it came to ahead with when the charter language was noticed and things fell out. But it's not just that the city and state code were noticed, it's that the abandonment, we didn't even know a street was being abandoned. And I think that has to be noted as to how, and it's a very difficult situation to be in right now.
Anyone else? Any of the commissioners?
Well, I'd like to follow up on that. I agree with Commissioner Gay that the plans, the rationale for the plans, the need to upgrade the lifeguard station, the desire to improve the comfort facilities, as I guess they're called, the bathrooms near the boardwalk, those are all worthy objectives that I know have been studied and talked about for a number of years. But in terms of why we are here this afternoon, we, the Planning Commission, and our background and our knowledge base for identifying pros and cons of this project, we are way behind the curve. As Susan just said, in August of 2022, over a year ago, the requirement that the Planning Commission review this proposal and write a report to the Board of Commissioners, and the requirement under the city charter that the Board of Commissioners then have a public hearing, that was triggered over a year ago. And all of these procedures and some of the substantive questions that have been raised this afternoon, they could have been resolved a long time ago. And with respect to that, I also, and I hate to say this, but I'm going to, there have been numerous inaccurate statements made with respect to these, both the charter and the state law requirements, particularly for our purposes, the state law requirement in 708. There have been statements that the referral to the Planning Commission is, and I quote, an additional previously unknown requirement, that it is, quote, a newly emergent requirement, and that Section 708 itself is a, quote, obscure, previously unknown state law. At the Board of Commissioners meeting a week ago today, September 29, 2023, it was also said about Section 708, our state law, the state law that requires this meeting this afternoon, quote, that we certainly have not used 708 in instances of other city projects, that it is a statute that we weren't aware of and that we haven't used in the past, and that, quote, no one has ever used it. As I say, I regret having to say this, but a simple search of the city's public records using either abandoned or Section 708 as your search term reveals that in early 2008, some property owners on Park Avenue proposed to buy part of the public right-of-way on that avenue for purposes of subdividing their property into 2 buildable lots. At an August 18th, 2008 meeting of the City Commissioners, at which the proposed Park Avenue sale was discussed, a city commissioner then advised that not only did Section 33 of the charter apply for a sale of public land, but, and I quote from the minutes of that meeting, since this issue concerns a public way, it needs to be remanded to the Planning Commission. He specifically referred to 22 Delaware Code, Chapter 7, which is where Section 708 is found, that requires this, as I say, this meeting this afternoon. The minutes for the next Planning Commission meeting, at which this matter was referred for discussion, includes a 5-page, single-spaced discussion of this process for abandoning or altering a public way, including a lengthy discussion by the city solicitor, who was then also the planning board solicitor, of this process for abandonment. The minutes of that meeting show that in responding to some questions, the city solicitor said, and I quote, 708 specifically addresses public ways and how they are laid out, altered, relocated, etc. This issue has been forwarded to the Planning Commission today under the context of 708, and the Planning Commission must review this as 708 requires. Now, this is all on the record in the minutes of the meeting, easily searchable, and it is hardly obscure. 708 was not previously unknown. It is not an obscure provision of state law. It's not a newly emergent requirement. And maybe most importantly, it is totally inaccurate to say the city has never been aware of Section 708 and that we have never used it in the past. And finally, as has been brought up, I agree that this is particularly frustrating because our review this afternoon, as well as this public hearing, were triggered in August of 2022, over a year ago. And all of these matters, these questions, these concerns could have been addressed and should have been addressed in the ensuing year. But instead, we are here this afternoon talking about it, and so we are where we are, and I would hope, and I think the Planning Commission will use its best efforts to meet the requirements of 708 to issue a report within 45 days, although I haven't, at this point, I'm not sure what that report will say, because it's easy this afternoon to identify all the positive, the pros of this particular project, but there have been a lot of cons, negative impacts at least referred to, if not investigated in full. So, but we will work, I personally will work as hard as we can to issue the required report within the 45 days, and we will stay tuned to see what happens next.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I don't think we're ready for a vote.
I agree.
Oh, okay, you want to discuss that?
Just some other contextual reference points. We took a look at the comprehensive development plan that was approved recently by the city and signed off by the governor for 2020. It's dated 2020, but I think it was adopted later. There are fleeting references to this issue, and so I'll just read the relevant section. This would be on page Appendix AC3. So this would be not the text of the CDP itself, but it's an attachment. So this is an input from the Boardwalk and Beach Committee. This is really the only substantive reference in the CDP to this issue. The second bullet point, which really focused on public restrooms, basically. So it's the committee recommended the creation of public family restrooms through the modification or expansion of existing space at the Baltimore and Delaware Avenue restroom facilities to facilitate improvements to the Boulder Avenue public restrooms. The committee further recommended relocating the Rehoboth Beach Patrol to a new second-floor addition so that the RPB's first-floor space could be utilized for the restroom improvements. These recommendations included considering maintaining the view shed as much as possible. So as far as we can tell, that is the only substantive reference to this issue in the CDP. That's another context that I just want to make sure the Planning Commission and the public was aware of.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
To invite a little dialogue to make sure I understand as a member of the commission the way forward here. As I see it, and I certainly agree we have been given an issue here at a late moment, but looking ahead, it seems to me we have been asked to produce a report that addresses the positives and the negatives of this project, and to produce that report within a set timeline, 45 days. So, two things about that. We can produce the report or not produce the report. With respect to negatives, we've all alluded to the fact that we have had sort of a dialogue, but an incomplete dialogue on the negatives because, you know, we don't have everyone before us. It's not a public meeting.
It is a public meeting, it's not a public hearing.
Public hearing, excuse me. If we produce a report or do not produce a report, it still goes back to the Board of Commissioners for their decision based on two criteria. Is that correct? As specified in the code?
Well, again, I'll go back and refer to, this would be the city charter, not the
Right.
code. So section 3 of the city charter, and I provide advice to the planning commission, not to the city, but as I read the city charter, it provides, obviously a city has the power to alter its streets, but the key is in D, at the time that the Board of Commissioners is to make their resolution, as opposed to our report to them, the commission shall hear such residents or taxables of the city or owners of property affected thereby as shall attend the hearing, a public hearing.
Right.
After hearing all objections, the commissioners, Board of Commissioners, shall at said meeting or at a subsequent date, as it may deem proper, adopt a resolution to proceed with or abandon the proposed locating, laying out, widening, altering, vacating, or abandoning of any such street or streets contemplated in its aforementioned prior resolution. B of that same, which I haven't spoken of, also talks about there being a hearing, including with respect to just compensation. And we've not heard any of the property owners talk about that, but a public hearing to talk about just compensation is also contemplated by Section 33 of the Charter.
But I was focused more on that would be an actual hearing, and its purpose would be to take comment and, more specifically, objections, plus any issues relating to just compensation. The reason why I'm pressing on this is I want to make sure I understand the way forward procedurally. And we heard people talk about, you know, the need for affirmative statements about no problems. I'm reading the applicable provisions to focus more on a record which advances objections to the project. Is that correct? I'm just trying to confirm that.
Yeah, so I think I would see it the same way as you do. And so one possible scenario, the vote is yours, not mine, but one possible scenario is that this planning commission this has not been a hearing, that you're not going to make findings of fact, conclusions of law, but you could generate a report if you chose to, or you could let the 45 days elapse, it's up to you, but you could generate a report for the benefit of the public and the affected property owners and the Board of Commissioners, so that when the Board of Commissioners conducts its public hearing, they have the benefit of your views, which are not findings of fact and conclusions of law, they're simply recommendations.
I think we should do that.
Thank you.
I think there's been a lot said today that they need to consider.
But contrary to that, in a way, if we're not taking testimony, then I don't know the basis upon which we make our decision in our report.
May I add something?
It doesn't.
Our
yeah.
counsel, if I'm wrong, I know I will be corrected, but I do not believe that we have to make a recommendation one way or the other. We simply, under 703, have to issue a report, and the report could raise as questions all of the issues that have surfaced this afternoon and whatever else we think of. without coming out with a recommendation because we lack the necessary information or additional information that I think you would need to have to make a recommendation, but it's the city commissioner's job it is to make that final decision.
Yeah, I think you are correct. And again, I'll just go back to the language that we talked about before, and more importantly, the actual language of the referral itself. So let me just repeat that again. So the actual language of the referral from the Board of Commissioners is now therefore be it resolved by the Commissioners of the City of Rehoboth Beach in session met this 29th day of September 2023 that under 22 Del Code Section 708, the proposed alteration of Baltimore Avenue at its easterly terminus is referred to the City of Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission for report concerning the impacts, both positive and negative, of the proposed resolution. That language, in my view, does not ask this body to make a recommendation, yea or nay.
And neither does Section 708.
Right. So
That's
that-
correct.
So I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Stewart.
Then don't we have what we need to compile a report?
Well, I think that's a decision as commissioners you'll have to make. And if, depending on where you land, is it a recommendation against? Is it a recommendation of for?
We don't have to make a
We
recommendation.
don't have to do that. Or door number 3 is, we don't have to do that. We can simply report what we have heard.
And I think we should definitely do that.
I think the recommendation is we can't make a recommendation. But here are facts that we think you should consider
And issues.
based on the knowledge of what we've been able to gain from what we've been able to research so far. And one of the things that's been difficult, and I thank the presenters for the information that we received, the blizzard of things we got over the last week, some which were 24 hours ago, was insufficient time to provide, at least in my opinion, the kind of in-depth analysis that I like to do, because you can't research it fast enough. What's happened here is, and unfortunately it's in sociology, it happens all the time, it's called institutional ignorance. It's not intended, it's purely accidental, but habit comes in and you do things in a way that you've done it in the past and you continue to do it and you don't even realize it's wrong until someone, somewhere, and I think Glenn was the one who pointed out that someone, an anonymous person said, excuse me, I think there's a piece of the code that the commissioners have forgotten. And people forgot it. I wasn't aware of it. I know a lot about the code, but I hadn't looked at that one recently, haven't thought about it. And then suddenly, when it was brought to the attention by the commissioners and I reviewed the meeting, it was like, aha, light bulbs went off and said, oops, we made a
Mike,
mistake.
Let me just clarify one thing with that, because that's what I thought too until about 2 days ago. The problem is that if it had been noted in public and to the commissioners a year ago or any time during the last year that the street was involved, that person would have come forward sooner.
Right,
So it wasn't even known that there was an issue until a few weeks ago.
okay.
It was not
And
publicly
that's,
known.
that's, I think, one of the problem now, since we have it, is we have to do the type of due diligence as we're doing right now to gain a better understanding. And quite frankly, I have more research to do on this, but there's a few, I don't want to say easy, but there are a few things that I asked and the questions that I raised with regard to, to Kevin, with regard, for example, the 2 ADA spaces and the outcropping, in terms of how much of the street needs to be abandoned as a function of necessity, and how much of that impacts in terms of the visual impact of what you're trying to achieve, the aesthetics, because you don't want to build an ugly building, but we're not here to talk about the building. In fact, that's a sort of a firewall. We have to talk about just the abandonment of the street. And from that standpoint, notwithstanding what the fire commissioner has said or anybody else, as a practical matter, both as an engineer and a former firefighter, I have some real problems and serious concerns with the outcropping and the 2 ADA spaces that are currently allocated for several reasons. One is because we have this problem in other streets, and I'll just give it as an example as to why I'm concerned. Many years ago, before it predates Kevin's involvement, the fire hydrants on several of the streets were relocated from, in my case of Stokely Avenue, from about 150 feet in the street from the ocean and located at the end of the street, centered. And that whole area lined off as being no parking. With signs, the fire hydrant, everything, all the things done according to code. Invariably, during the summer, continuously for 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon, you cannot get at that fire hydrant. It's because of the multitude of cars that come in and park for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, unload all their goodies, quickly run it up to the beach, quickly run back. And you can't keep calling the police department to say, get these people out of here, get these people out of here. And yet it happens repeatedly. Looking at this, my concern is you have 2 ADA spaces, which will have to, in my opinion, technically should have to be located somewhere else on the street. And then why I raised the question, were these 30-minute ADA spaces or full spaces? Those will be consumed during the summer continuously. And the outcropping, that reduces the amount of available free space for emergency vehicles. Notwithstanding that it may meet the code, it does not meet the future potential requirements as this area develops, which it's about to do. And so I have a serious concern as an engineer and a planner and a former firefighter with regard to that. I think that 20 feet is exceedingly important and that we should minimize how much of the street we take away. And if it could be made 25 feet, whatever, without impacting the physical design, it should be done. That would be one of the considerations that I would put forth with regard for the commissioners to think about.
Well, to set up some type of path forward, oh, did you have, Mr. Stockdale? Okay. I would put out for your consideration the possibility of a motion to have the city, have our attorney, rather, our solicitor here, prepare a report summarizing what we've heard here today, the good, the bad, and the in-between, and that we bring that forward for consideration at our next meeting. I've established a special meeting on December 2nd. November, I keep saying that. I can't wait for Christmas. But November 2nd, we have a special meeting. It's a Thursday, and then our regular meeting is Friday, November 3rd. But perhaps on the November 2nd agenda, we have something to review and consider and move forward with or not. How does that sound? Do I have a motion to that effect?
Moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That's what we'll do. Thank you. All right, thank you everyone that came today. It's been quite a day.
We learned a lot. Thanks, appreciate it.
Thank you.
You conclude the meeting?
Let's have a 5-minute recess,
break?
please.
Okay.
5-minute recess.
Yes, I need a 5-minute break.
Oh, hell.
Are we assembled again? My suggestion is the next agenda item has to do with the recommendations for it's considered discussion, continued discussion and possible consideration of a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners on revisions to Chapter 236, Subdivision of Land and Site Plan Review. My suggestion is that, Mr. Mehta, if you would give us a topical walkthrough, and then we can discuss the path forward, which would not involve a vote today, I believe.
So I'm happy to do that, and this is a natural follow-on to your public meeting from last month where this issue was teed up. So pursuant to the chair's direction, I thought I would simply tee up topically some of the issues that we've talked about without engaging any wordsmithing here today, but similar to what you all just decided on, to send me off to come up with a draft for your review and consideration at a future meeting. You could adopt a similar approach here and provide some direction for me to prepare a revised recommendation from you for your consideration on November 2nd or November 3rd as a revised recommendation to the Board of Commissioners based on your discussion last month. My suggestion would be that we break this down into three categories. One is to start with your recommendation from February of 2023 and see if you have any directions to me regarding any tweaks that you want to make there. Again, without engaging in wordsmithing today, there's some things that we could generally talk about. In a similar manner, a second category would be whether there are any clarifications that you would like to make, or suggest, I should say, recommend, because you don't make the laws, but you could recommend to the Board of Commissioners based on any other developments that have occurred over the past several months since your February recommendation. And then the third category, as we discussed in September, there was significant and impressive work product generated by Wallace Montgomery, and including several, in my view anyway, for what it's worth, several good ideas. And so a third category may be that there are ideas from the Wallace Montgomery work product that you would like to include in any further recommendation. So just systematically, it seemed to me that might be a logical way to approach your directional discussion here today, if that's okay.
Yes, sir.
I believe everybody has a copy. We can also show, if we can still show it on the screen, the public is aware of it. So we have the red line. So this is your February 2023 recommendation in red line form. Yes. Yes. That is it in red line form. We showed it in non-red line form last month, and I believe one of you asked me to prepare it, not to prepare it, it's always been prepared this way, but to display it in a red line form, and that's what you have in front of you here. So again, I will tee up the issues, but it's your direction. So the first category would be, are there any tweaks that you would like to make to your February 2023 recommendation? So for example, there's some obvious typographical errors for which I apologize. I don't think we need to spend too much time on that. I'll just go ahead and do those. There was discussion in September about changing, this would be in 23630E19. There was some discussion back in September changing the last phrase. So instead of to read other environmental factors, to read other environmental factors rather than similar environmental issues. And if that is still your direction, then I would draft something along those lines. Then there was also some discussion in your definition of substantial renovation back from February of 2023, there was discussion, if you look, I apologize, that's, substantial renovation, as you recommended, the new definition of substantial renovation back in February, it was as follows: a project that either A, involves more than a 25% increase in the footprint, gross floor area, height, or lot coverage of an existing building, or B, requires the demolition or reconstruction of more than 25% of the gross floor area, as those terms are used in Chapter 270 of the Code. And there was discussion about, in that last phrase, demolition or reconstruction of more than 25% of the gross floor area of what?
An existing building.
So that would be,
Which is comparable to the
Doesn't really need to be an A or a B.
Clause A.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That should all be mushed into one
okay?
project that involves reconstruction or demolition of more than a 25% increase. In other words, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I understand. So I can prepare it in that
Okay.
manner.
So just mush it into not an A and a B
Got it.
by taking the language of demolition or reconstruction and incorporating that into the first sentence and period.
And then, and again, this is sort of adopting, to a certain point, some of the work generated by Wallace Montgomery. They had some minor suggestions regarding drafting, really, for the definitions, which I thought were well taken, and I would recommend just including them in the revised recommendation.
They're not here.
They're not here, but they would be incorporated into a new proposed recommendation that I would prepare for you for your consideration publicly on the 2nd or 3rd of November. So that's the first category. Anything else on just sort of minor tweaks to what you prepared in February? So then the second category, deals with an issue that arose this summer, and that is whether you would like to recommend to the Board of Commissioners language that clarifies, which in my view, has always been the case, but to clarify that the Planning Commission certainly can take into consideration, the analyses of zoning code compliance generated by either the planner or the building inspector. But ultimately, the Planning Commission is an independent body and should make its own determinations with the benefit of the city representatives when it makes ultimate findings of fact and conclusions of law in a quasi-judicial capacity and renders those in findings that then, of course, are appealable to the Board of Commissioners, which ultimately has the authority to interpret its own code. So that would be another issue that came up, but it's not in your February recommendations, and the issue would be whether you wanted to direct me to come up with any additional language clarifying what I think has been the case, but that was the second category.
Is there a consensus on that?
Yes.
Okay, please move forward.
The third category would be, as I said earlier, there are a lot of very good ideas, in my view, anyway, in the Wallace Montgomery draft that you do not have available to you in February that you may want to think about incorporating into your revised report. So I'll just summarize them, and you can tell me, we don't debate the wording of it, but I can just summarize the issues here. First, I think it's a very good idea that the actual code be clarified to say that the 30-day clock starts to run. The 30-day clock for when the Planning Commission is, expected to consider a submission, starts to run not from, as we heard from today, from when an applicant submits a site plan, for example, to the city, but when it from the date from which the city departments forward that plan to the Planning Commission for the Planning Commission's review. I think the language of the code could be improved so it's very clear for all stakeholders. It's not just for the benefit of the planning, but it's for all stakeholders. So their expectations, for example, today from Mr. Robertson, that everybody understands that our clock starts to run when we receive the
And
materials.
that is the current practice.
That is the current practice, but I think it could be, the language could be
Could be
better.
strong, yes, because I don't think it's understood by the applicants that that's the
I
case.
know it's not,
Yeah.
from what I'm hearing.
Do we have consensus on that? Yes.
A second category from the Wallace-Montgomery draft that I think was really quite helpful is to compare and contrast Wallace-Montgomery's language and your language in two sub-buckets. One is, what types of projects do you want to spend your time reviewing? And what types of projects do you not want to spend your time reviewing? Like, affirmatively, this is what we want to spend our time reviewing, and then these are the de minimis projects, or however you want to call them, the carve-outs, whatever, the bucket that you don't want to spend your time looking at. And their approach, Wallace-Montgomery's, and they're here today, Wallace-Montgomery's approach was slightly different, both affirmatively and negatively, than your approach. And so one thing that it's up to you that you may want to instruct me to do is to try to harmonize your approach with the Wallace-Montgomery approach, or you could just say, look, don't bother, we like the way that we had it. I think they have some good ideas that you should consider, and I'm happy to at least attempt to harmonize them and put it in front of you.
Very good.
Consensus on that? Yes. All right. Let's back up, if we may, Luke, to category number 2. We had just talked about that the Planning Commission can independently review, consider a site plan for compliance with Chapter 270, et cetera, and whatnot. So we went through that analysis and strengthened that language about what we're bound by and what we're not. But then there's two other items. One, consider.
Oh, I apologize, yes.
Consider inserting similar language in other articles of 236.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. So this issue has come up in the context, this summer it came up in the context of site plan reviews. Of course, you are also charged by code to review proposed subdivisions. And the language in the subdivision code, I think, is crystal clear on this issue. But if you're proposing language that I think is consistent with historical practice for in the context of site plan review, you may want to do that also in the context of subdivision review.
I would just like to indicate that I think we ought to keep subdivision and site plan review separate. My suggestion would be that we go through and make whatever changes, discuss, draft, whatever, to the site plan review code. But in the 2 years I've been on the Planning Commission, other than a couple of partitionings, we haven't done anything with subdivisions, and I think that's going, for my purposes, would slow down perhaps our review of the site plan review provisions and hold any changes to the subdivision to look at it and consider it, but not mix it in with our site plan review analysis.
Okay, so we would not make any changes to 236 at this time.
No.
Make it to the site plan.
To the
part,
site plan
Articles-
portion of
Article
236.
Article 7, but not the subdivision
Right.
articles.
Yeah, the first 29 provisions, give or take, of 236 pertain to subdivision.
Right.
And I frankly, to be perfectly honest, have never read them. I don't think probably many of us have. But I just don't want to slow down our site plan proceeding
Fair
and
enough.
recommendations to the Board of Commissioners in order to provide time for subdivision, which I think is a good thing to take up, but just not in connection with site plan review.
Is there a consensus on that?
Yes.
Okay.
And the other point, which really feeds into good ideas, in my view, anyway, from Wallace-Montgomery, so I was going to get to that anyway, was suggestions for modifications to Section 236 632A. There was some language in there in terms of the implications, the negative implications of the mere forwarding of a report from the building inspector to the Planning Commission. And that was language that was actually a deletion, not an addition, from the Wallace-Montgomery report that I think would make sense for you all to consider.
Deleting.
Yes, a deletion from the current section 23632A. In particular, the language which is stricken in the Wallace-Montgomery report. So the current language that I'm about to read is proposed to be stricken by Wallace-Montgomery, and you may want to consider that in November. If all the departments and agencies determine that the site plan complies with their respective regulations and requirements, the site plan shall be forwarded from the building inspector to the Planning Commission with a report indicating the department's preliminary approval of the site plan. The Wallace-Montgomery folks recommended striking that language, and you may want to consider that one way or the other in November.
Okay, so that's just something to be considered.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I will put that, I will incorporate that into the proposed revised recommendation for your vote.
Is there a consensus?
Yes.
I think so, might be good.
Okay.
And then the final suggestion from Wallace-Montgomery that I think warrants your consideration is the notion to make concept plan review mandatory rather than discretionary.
And the commissioners took up that issue, but did they not, they didn't do anything with it, right? I know they talked about it, and I thought there was consensus that they wanted it to be.
Can I ask what the benefit and burden of that? It's not apparent to me.
I think the benefit is probably to the applicant because they get an early look at what we think about what they're doing. I mean, if the idea is just off the rails, they probably would be better off to know that at the beginning of the process than spend all that money to have a site plan prepared, submitted for preliminary review.
But doesn't that kind of take care of itself? Then they probably should avail themselves, but do we need to make it mandatory?
Right now, it's discretionary. I mean,
But what's the movement? What's the impetus, or what's the urge to make it mandatory? What does that do? Anything?
I think what we're trying to do is avoid having to consider a preliminary site plan that's off the rails.
Right. Okay.
And could have been stopped early on.
And Beach Walk didn't go through concept review. Most projects do, but there's some don't, so.
You know, we've had, notwithstanding the last 3 or 4 years worth of submittals, but going previous to that, we had several examples over time where people came in and spent a lot of money and didn't know what the hell they were doing. And it was the kind of situation, and this predates Matt's time, they didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't have sufficient guidance from a breadth of people that had broad knowledge to assist them, and that's unfortunate. So I think this would be a great, it doesn't slow anything down, and in fact, it probably speeds things up in the net of it, because you have more knowledge being brought to bear and sooner into the process.
But you know, counter to that, and I don't disagree with you on the essential point, but we've had a recent applicant who used concept review to, you know, show us the color of fabrics and give us a history of from the 1980s, you know, and it was a total waste of time because there was no substance in that, and, you know, sort of.
Well, I don't think we
sense
can
that we
mandate
should
that they
just
turn in a
like
good,
that.
yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
we can mandate they turn in a good work product.
And if they hadn't come to concept, if they hadn't done it at concept, they probably would have done it at preliminary.
But if you go down this road, you could, and again, there were some suggestions from Wallace Montgomery, at least, you know, presumably a preliminary review of the site plan is going to be much more detailed. You could identify what you, at the project concept stage, what you affirmatively want in and what you don't want to have.
Right.
But that would be a discussion that we would have to, like, because right now, it ain't in your code.
And you see, if it also, I think, would be helpful if we identify at a concept level what we perceive to be required variances from the Board of Adjustment, we can give them direction to go do that.
The February recommendations had a Section D to Section 236-31, which is the concept review provisions that says that we have the discretion not to conduct a project concept review under this section in connection with any project for which a variance, rezoning, or other authorization under applicable federal, state, county, or city laws and regulations is required until such time as the variance, rezoning, or other governmental authorization is obtained. So we do have the discretion for something that's obvious, like they're clearly going to need a variance, or they're clearly going to need rezoning, or whatever. We don't have to have, under the February recommendations, we have the discretion not to do the concept review until they have met all of their, at least their legal requirements.
That would be better as a discretionary reason not to do a preliminary review, because we won't know until we have a concept review of whether variances are needed, and we won't have an opportunity to communicate that. Do you know what I mean? That would be a better interim step after concept review and before preliminary review.
Well, it's also, that same language is also in our February submission with respect to preliminary review.
Okay. Oh, it is, it's there in both?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you would strike it from concept?
Now, the language in February for preliminary review is more detailed
Yeah.
because it contains factors the planning commission may consider in exercising discretion to overcome the presumptive deferral.
That's 32F.
And then it
right.
goes through a bunch of factors. I don't know whether you'd want to include that detail in the concept review provision, but, you know, we are covered by discretion not to do this. And I'd make one other point in terms of the basic question. I think it's useful for the public. You know, this is a very small community, lots of, rumors, stories, conjectures going around about what somebody wants to do with a particular project, a big commercial project, and I think it's helpful to the public as well as to us and the Board of Commissioners, just to see on a preliminary basis what it is conceptually they think the property owner wants to do with that property. And, it's an hour, 2 hours in a meeting, but I think as I say, I think it's helpful across the board.
And just so I understand my directions on that issue is to delete basically the sequencing language from the project concept language. In other words, you're referring to some of the sequencing that, if a variance is required to put off planning commission review. As I understand your suggestion is that we do not need to have that language in that portion of the recommendation that relates to concept review.
No, I would keep the language.
Even in respect to the concept
review mandatory, change the property owner may to the property owner shall request project concept review, but keep these caveats as to the circumstances under which we can decline or defer until these governmental
That was before, right? That was the February.
Yeah, this is something.
You are saying delete the 236 in the handout we got today, the 236-31D red line.
No.
How about if I just, I'll keep it the way it is, and
Talk about
you can
this
debate it
offline.
in November. How about that?
Okay.
Because we're never going to have a meeting as a body to consider an applicant unless we get into a concept review with them. So we won't be able to, you have to have a concept review before you can say, we think you need to go get these variances before you do the site plan. Because otherwise, how is it before us?
Right.
Does that make sense? That's why it doesn't need to be in the concept review part. No?
I'm confused.
Okay, sorry.
No, I see what
That's
Susan's
easily
saying, and
done.
I think she's right.
Yeah. So the language about us, the sequencing,
Step- the
only needs to
discretion.
be our discretion not to move into preliminary review
Right.
if we've
Right.
identified
Exactly.
identify variances that are needed.
Yeah, I don't see these things as fighting each other. Like there can be a mandatory requirement to submit a plan
Yeah, we agree with that.
by the
We're
applicant,
past
and
that.
then you could still have the discretion to defer consideration of it. I think they
Even without
harmonize.
hearing it?
We have
Even
to
without
hear a
hearing it?
concept review. We're not going to vote to defer it unless we're together hearing it.
Well, so I think the language that was actually suggested by you when we discussed this back in February was that the the determination on sequencing could occur during a hearing. That is, the aha moment could happen during your consideration.
But we, in that case, we would be conducting a concept review.
Yeah, and so the issue would be, yes, you're conducting a concept review during the course of your during the course of your concept review, which would be mandatory under the proposal. You would say, oh, wait a minute, it looks like the variance is required. Maybe we want to tap the brakes.
Okay, okay.
Is that the direction that you would like to give me?
It sounds like that's what you're saying, and that's what you would say.
Are we tapping? Yeah, that's fine.
At least for purpose of drafting, for your all's vote in November.
Yeah.
Although I can't imagine as a practical matter that we would ever stop cold in the middle of a concept review and say, you guys need a variance, we'll see you next month when, and if you get one.
We'd say, before you come back for a preliminary,
Right. We would hear
we'd
out the
like
entire
you
proposal.
to have these variances.
Right, that would
or
be in-
modify your
That would be in our
project.
written comments following
Right,
concept review.
exactly.
Well, but it could still be considered during the course of, because how many concept reviews have we seen that were in more than one meeting? A lot, right? So during the course of could be between the first and second concept meeting. I mean, we'd like to think they weren't, but we've had a lot that have gone multiple meetings while still in concept, right? I mean, I don't know if, I assume when one Rehoboth comes back, they'll be preliminary by that point. But we've had others that have gone several meetings.
Okay.
Luke, may I, I'm almost afraid to do this, but one last thing, because I know we're at the end of the rainbow here, and as I understand it, you're going to produce another writing for us, and we're going to look at it, make sure we're good to go. I lost track of your categories, and I think I was wanting to make a comment on category 2, but the train left the station. Could I raise for all of us to think about the language in 23630A? It has this phrase about project or projects that individually or collectively. And I have always struggled with the phrasing of individually or collectively when connected to project or projects. I will note that is existing language, but the rest of the provisions all talk about project in the singular. So it always, the language is not parallel, and I think there could be some potential issues buried there about, you know, how these numbers are counted when you have a project individually or collectively. And I would like you to think about whether we couldn't just talk about a project and avoid that whole potential quagmire.
Is that possibly fixed in Wallace Montgomery's version? Because I know that's what, didn't you just say that, Luke, you're gonna meld together their 30A and our 30A?
Yeah, and the Wallace Montgomery folks are here. My recollection is that their approach was, even in this preamble language, was very different than what you had recommended. I'm not sure those, that preamble language harmonizes that well. The specifics of the Wallace Montgomery report in terms of, 1 through 6, where they had some suggested language and added mixed use, for example, those are the types of things I was thinking would be easily melded in. I'm not so sure the preamble language from your report and their report is easily harmonized, but I don't want to speak for you guys.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a very fair point, and it's easy, again, for me to tee this issue up for you for your consideration in November.
Okay. Anything else? Well, have a good weekend.
I would just say, could I suggest that as part of the draft that we did provide to you, the very last section in that was Section 237-37, which contemplates fees. I think that this is an area that should be addressed because right now there's no fee for concept review, and the fee for a site plan from beginning of staff review through the end of your public hearing and vote at the final level is $500. So that doesn't even cover, in some instances, I doubt that would cover publication costs in a newspaper or things like that. So it's a very outdated number. So I would strongly recommend that that be one item that you address and move further to the planning commission.
Does your suggestion have numbers in it?
Yes.
Does your suggestion have numbers in it?
Our section we provided the overall 236, and as part of that, and in discussions that we'd had with the city manager, the thought was to, at some point, remove specific numbers from the individual sections of the code and develop a code section that is basically fees. So
schedule.
our language in section 230 or section 37 basically refers to this other chapter that has not been developed yet, but a part of the documents that we provided to you all was a draft fee schedule, and it does have at least initial recommendations for fee schedules in terms of a base fee for the application, as well as professional fees that would cover any reviews. So if you refer a certain item to us, for example, or to Mr. Mehta, things like that, that those are covered by the applicant versus the city and the taxpayers.
Lauren, may I ask a question? I can't remember what your draft said on this subject, but would it cover fees for concept review?
Yes.
Because there's no official staff review or commentary on a concept review. That only comes in for preliminary review. Now, obviously, Mr. Mehta attends every one of our meetings, concept review or otherwise, but I would suggest that you at least think about whether it's appropriate to charge fees for concept review, since there's no, say, staff review and reporting required, at least under the code.
And part of the our documentation that we provided to you included a provision for at least preliminarily looking at the concept plan so that we could identify any issues that we saw that could try to address them before it gets to that preliminary level. So our version did incorporate a staff or consultant level review of the concept plan documents. However, that review was certainly not as in-depth as it would be, for example, for the preliminary plan.
Yeah, because the applicant is not required to submit a formal site plan application until preliminary review, at which time that's what triggers, at least under the code, the responsibility of the staff to report and comment on, and provide comments to the planning commission. I'm just asking the question.
I think the idea of a separate fee schedule section is an excellent idea.
I think so. Oh, the basic, I absolutely do.
Well, particularly in view of the fact that there may be additional consultants or experts that we need to opine, which you will subcontract with, but that will boost the fees that consultants charge. So I think we need to be able to provide for that, rather than just having the city foot that bill. Well, since we're all here, Ms. Womack, for the election of officers, what do you have in your file?
I only have 3 responses.
Okay, and what offices are they for?
For the chair, and one was for secretary.
Yeah, you need to respond.
I'm sorry, I didn't. like to
Okay.
do that.
We could have a nomination from the floor, I believe.
I was going to say, we can do nominations from the
Okay.
Yeah.
floor.
Is there a proposed slate of chair, vice chair, secretary? And Mr. Mandelis, you are excused. Mhm. Is there a proposed slate of officers?
Can I make a proposal?
Please.
I believe that the existing officers have done a splendid job, far and above the minimums. And I would recommend that each be reelected to their current office if they so wish to be reelected to their current office.
Well, to be consistent with what I've done in the past, I've nominated Susan Gay for all three offices. And I'll make that motion as well. All right, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Strange.
I would like to know, I take it Ann has received nominations for the secretary position.
Yes, she did. Mr. Dewey, I believe, submitted his
I
consent.
submitted it.
Well, I would like to nominate Mr. Dewey to replace me as secretary.
Okay, all right. With that amendment, is there a second?
Yes, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, I think.
Do we have other reports? Are we going to go through this? No? Okay, there's nothing? Okay.
Meeting adjourned?
We are adjourned.
Okay. Great.
Happy
Friday.
Congratulations. You finally got a secretary's position.
Thank you for doing that, and those measurements, it turned out to be very handy.
It's 65.4. Have a good weekend. No.